annual Academy Awards, which covered the years from 1929 through 1930. Well, that's kind of an approximation. 1930 was an interesting Oscars year for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the Academy decided to hold the ceremony in November, which meant these awards took place a mere 7 months after the previous ones. The ceremony itself was again held at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, and again hosted by Conrad Nagel. Secondly, whereas the last winners were voted by special committee, this time the vote was opened up to all Academy members. And of particular mention, Sarah and Son was the first picture nominated for any category, in this case Best Actress, that was directed by a woman, Dorothy Arzner. The second Oscars had taken place at a time of great upheaval in the industry with the advent of sound, and the nominees there were kind of a throw it at the wall and see what sticks kind of situation. They wanted to show how modern they were, so they simply couldn't bear to nominate any silent films. However, the sound offerings, having been made in a big hurry by people who were still unsure of how to handle this new technology, were what may widely be considered less than stellar. Not so this time around. 7 months appears to have been a good enough margin for certain dedicated craftspeople, and the turnaround is really impressive. Most of these films are still reasonably stage-bound, but not so much as you might think. The acting runs the gamut from over-the-top to amazingly natural, and we have a range from serious action dramas all the way to light musical comedies. Check out this list and you'll see what I mean. The nominees are The Big House, 1930, directed by George Hill, starring Chester Morris and Wallace Beery. A prison drama which garnered Best Writing and Best Sound Recording, which would have been a big deal to win that at that time. This also has a baby-faced Robert Montgomery as a young man who gets sent to the house of the title on a drunk driving manslaughter charge. His cellmates are hardened criminals Morris and Beery, who teach him how to survive as well as embroil him in dirty deeds. We have a nice character switch, seeing that Morris realizes the error of his ways and decides to go straight. Montgomery, on the other hand, proves a weak moral character and continues his downward trajectory throughout the film. This is my second time seeing Morris in something. It's a better part in a better film, and he rises to the occasion. I am so happy when I discover new, to me, actors. Beery is delightfully tough and gives his part just what it needs. The cinematography is also delightful at times. I need to mention there's a big showdown between the prisoners and the guards at the end. They even bring in tanks to quell the uprising, and the tanks were so small at the time they were actually kind of adorable. Anyway, the cinematography in that scene makes use of a crane, which I wasn't expecting, and I was just like, oh, it's so exciting. I'm such a nerd. Anyway, I do very much recommend you see this one if possible. I will put in the description, of course, where I found all these streaming. Disraeli, 1929. Directed by Alfred E. Green. Starring George Arliss and Doris Lloyd. It was a winner for Best Actor for George Arliss. As might be expected, this is a biopic on 19th century British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, which was all I knew about him going in. For anyone else who doesn't know, Disraeli was very pro-British and a big architect of colonization, so it is him we have to thank for so much. Yes, that is sarcasm. The film covers his attempt to get the Suez Canal in Egypt up and going without spies and whatnot creating sabotage against it. At the same time, he engineers a love connection between the two ingenue leads, which coincidentally assists his political scheme in coming to fruition, the sly dog. Now, I happen to like Arliss as an actor, and it's cool to see Doris Lloyd, who has had a decent film career as well, but who I mainly know as the voice of the Rose in Disney's Alice in Wonderland. But this one is the only film on this list I don't particularly recommend. It is very much what you think of when you think of an early sound film. Very stagey, very over-the-top in performance, and fairly dull. There's no particular innovation in shots or story, and not much interesting happens. Arliss has a few moments which are pleasant enough. As said, I do find him an engaging actor, although over the top often, but he was of his time. But those moments there's not many of them. There is one scene where the young male lead is asking the young lady lead to marry him, and he makes a royal hash of it, which was mildly charming. Also, Disraeli's wife was played by Arliss's real-life wife, which was neat. And apparently they'd done this many times before. There was a silent version in 1921 and 2 stage versions in 1911 and 1917 that they starred in. But really, that's about it when it comes to this film. It's interesting as a curiosity only. The Divorcee, 1930, directed by Robert Leonard, starring Norma Shearer and Chester Morris. Winner for Best Actress for Shearer, and deservedly so. I'm not a big fan of her, so I don't say that lightly. Also, Chester Morris again in quite a different role, and also very good in this one. I am liking this guy. The plot is about 2 young marrieds very much in love. On celebrating their 3rd anniversary, the wife finds out her husband has had a one-night stand. Deciding what's good for the gander is good for the goose, she does likewise. Of course, this isn't the same thing at all to him. Oh, no, no, no. And they end up separating. After some time in which they are both miserable without each other, they reconcile. It's a very simple plot, but A, it's a pre-code movie, so while hardly explicit, it is a bit more clear about exactly what is going on at certain points, and B, the performances really see this one through. It could have been far more melodramatic, but as said, Shearer and Morris are for the most part quite effortlessly natural, which given the acting style of the time was rather a feat. Comparing this to Shearer's later roles, at least the ones I've seen, which admittedly are not many, it's amazing that this was the same actress. And I'm wondering if she was just very good at giving the director what they were looking for, as some actors are. I really like this one, and I have no difficulty recommending it. Also, point of interest, this one has Robert Montgomery playing the husband's best friend, which proves a debatable turn, so very different parts for everyone all around. The Love Parade, 1929, directed by Ernst Lubitsch, starring Jeanette MacDonald and Maurice Chevalier. Apparently, this is the movie that saved Paramount's fortunes after the stock market crash, and this musical comedy is even today quite charming and funny. MacDonald is the queen and sole ruler of the fictional Sylvania, and Chevalier is the charming rogue who falls for and marries her, only to find that his role as prince consort is lacking in power or even interesting things to do. Given its stars, the fact that it's also an operetta, more than a musical, shouldn't come as a surprise. The songs are, on the whole, not particularly memorable, or even easy to decipher. Perhaps I should have put on the subtitles. And the performances aren't necessarily subtle, but then this isn't the sort of film that calls for subtle, so really they're spot on. MacDonald and Chevalier, this is the first film I've seen him in, have an undoubted chemistry, and both play their parts with a mischievous sparkle. Chevalier even plays to the camera on purpose a couple of times. Lupino Lane and Lillian Roth are also excellent in supporting roles. As another pre-coder about a couple with marital problems, it is not hard to figure out where a lot of those problems are stemming from. Again, not entirely overt, but not nearly as covert as in those post-1934 Hollywood years, and although I kind of appreciate the purported innocence and or creativity of later films, it's also neat to see a more definitive representation of humanity. Like, yeah, even in this day and age, humans were very human, and things really don't change all that much over the years. Anyway, yeah, this is a fun one to check out if you're patient with operatic singing. All Quiet on the Western Front, 1930. Directed by Louis Milestone. Starring Lou Ayres and Louis Wolheim. The winner! It's hard to beat a good war film for the Oscars. This also won Best Director. This is the only one on this list I'd already seen. It's a perennial favorite of mine over the years. Exquisitely shot, and a fantastic message which stands the test of time. Young Lou Ayres heads a cast of largely young idealistic German lads who enter World War I with enthusiasm, ready to fight for their fatherland and certain of their victory. All too soon, the reality of what war is sets in. By the end, they are older, wiser, and, mostly, dead. It bears a second mention that there are just so many gorgeous shots in this one, and the battle scenes in particular are still hard to watch for all the right reasons. That final scene still hits in the gut. Even with fairly stiff competition this season, it's easy to see why this was the one to win out. There have been a few other versions of the story which I will have to watch at some point, but by all means, do not overlook this one. So yeah, this was a most excellent award season, which has kind of rejuvenated the project for me, and now I'm looking forward to the fourth. So, have you seen any of these films? And if so, which ones? Did you like them? And if so, why? And the converse as well. Let me know in the comments as well as any other thoughts you might have. I will see you next week. Until then, hang in there, buddy. I'm rooting for you. Bye now.